Welcome to the Partis channel. Today, we explain Genesis chapter 9 in a clear and simple way, step by step. Okay, let's dive into this explainer and absolutely unpack the incredible reboot of humanity found in this text. We're going to walk through this fascinating narrative exactly as it appears. We'll be covering every single verse in order so you can truly understand the who, what, where, and why of this critical moment in human history. It's like a giant puzzle, and we're going to place every piece together. To really grasp the weight of this chapter, we first have to pause and remember our context. I want you to imagine, just for a second, standing on a devastatingly empty earth as those massive floodwaters finally start to recede. The world as Noah knew it, it's completely gone. Everything that breathed on dry land has perished, except for the 8 people and the animals that just stepped off the ark. This is exactly where Noah and his family find themselves, standing in the mud, waiting for God's instructions. The silence must have been absolutely overwhelming. So, what are the rules for this entirely new world? How are they supposed to survive now that everything has changed? Section 1, a fresh start, a new rules. So, the very first thing God does is bless Noah and his sons. He empowers them to step out into this desolate landscape and actually thrive. And as part of that blessing, he gives a very specific command: be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth. Now, if you've been following along from the beginning, that phrase should sound really familiar. It beautifully echoes the original command given to Adam back in Genesis chapter 1, signaling a massive, literal reset for the human race. God is explicitly telling Noah, hey, the plan hasn't changed. The earth is meant to be inhabited. The devastation of the flood is over, and it is time for life to multiply, to spread out across the globe once again, and to start over. But right away, we see there's an explicit shift in the rules of nature. Back in Genesis chapter 1, humanity was given only green plants for food. It was essentially a vegan world. But here in Genesis 9, specifically verses 2 and 3, God institutes a major change. First off, the relationship between man and beast is permanently altered. The text says the fear and dread of humans will now fall upon all the animals. Why? Well, second, humanity is officially permitted to eat meat. God says everything that lives and moves will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything. It is a dramatic shift from that original Edenic ideal, perhaps accommodating the harsh new realities and the different environment of this post-flood world. However, with this new permission to eat meat comes some very strict boundaries. Let's look closely at verses 4 through 6. God immediately establishes clear moral boundaries, strictly prohibiting the consumption of lifeblood. Verse 4 says, but you must not eat meat that has its lifeblood still in it. Blood represents life, right? And even though animals can now be eaten for sustenance, their life is not to be treated casually or disrespectfully. Then God moves from animals to humans, and he lays down the ultimate penalty for murder. He says he will demand an accounting for human life. What does that mean? It means ultimate justice. If an animal kills a human, the animal is held accountable. And if a human sheds the blood of another human, their blood will be shed by humans. This is absolutely crucial. It's the foundational establishment of human justice and law, put in place to prevent the earth from returning to the terrible violence that caused the flood in the first place. So you might be wondering, what's the profound reasoning behind this incredibly strict law against murder? It's given right at the end of verse 6. Why is human blood considered so sacred? God states it plainly. For in the image of God has God made man. Let that sink in. Every single human life has inherent, undeniable value because it reflects the image of the Creator himself. When someone takes a human life, they aren't just destroying a biological organism, they are literally attacking the very image of God on earth. This one simple phrase establishes the dignity and worth of every single person who will ever be born in this newly restarted world. Section 2, the Rainbow Covenant. Now God shifts focus to a grand universal promise, establishing a formal covenant. In this biblical context, a covenant isn't just a casual agreement, it means a binding treaty or a solemn, unbreakable guarantee. But I want you to notice carefully who this covenant is actually with. In verses 8 through 10, God says, I now establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you and with every living creature that was with you. Did you catch that? It is an eternal guarantee extended not just to Noah and all future human beings, but to the birds, the livestock, and the wild animals. It is a universal promise covering the entire earth. And what exactly is the promise of this massive covenant? Verse 11 spells it out perfectly. Never again will all life be cut off by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. This text brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of the promise, total, absolute assurance against another global watery destruction. Think about it from Noah's perspective. He and his family had just experienced literally the most traumatic event in human history. Every time the sky got dark and it started to rain, they probably felt absolute terror, wondering if it was happening all over again. Here, God is graciously giving them absolute security so they can actually live and rebuild without the constant paralyzing fear of total annihilation. To completely seal this deal, God provides a breathtakingly visual token in verses 12 through 17. He says, "I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant." He literally calls it an everlasting reminder in the sky of this exact treaty. When the dark clouds roll in and humanity might begin to panic, the rainbow will appear. And God says, "I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant." It's just a beautiful visual guarantee written right into the fabric of the weather itself, showing that God will keep his word to preserve the earth. Section 3, Noah's Vineyard. As the earth slowly begins to be repopulated by Noah's three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the narrative takes a turn. The grand cosmic promises we just talked about, they zoom right back down to the dusty, everyday earth. Settling into his new life, what does Noah do? Well, he becomes a farmer. The text tells us the very first recorded agricultural act after the flood is Noah planting a vineyard. He cultivates it, he harvests the grapes, but as we're about to see, things quickly go awry. Reading the simple meaning of the text step by step in verses 21 and 22, we see a really tragic sequence of events unfold. First, Noah drinks the wine he produced, and he becomes drunk. He completely loses his self-control and ends up lying entirely uncovered, passed out inside his tent. He is in a highly vulnerable, undignified state. Then his son Ham enters the tent, and the text goes out of its way to explicitly point out that Ham is the father of Canaan. Ham saw his father's nakedness and told his two brothers outside. This is huge. Instead of protecting his father's dignity in a moment of weakness, Ham actually exposes him. He goes out and broadcasts his father's shameful state to his brothers. In the ancient world, this is a deeply unfortunate breach of family respect and a massive failure to protect a vulnerable parent. But verse 23 shows us the exact opposite reaction from the other two brothers. Notice the stark contrast here. Shem and Japheth take a garment, they lay it across their shoulders, and they deliberately walk into the tent backwards. They keep their faces turned the other way so they won't even accidentally see their father's vulnerability. They cover him up, they go to great, deliberate lengths to protect their father's dignity without exploiting the situation and without participating for a single second in Ham's gossip. It's a powerful picture of honor.
Section 4, Curses and Blessings.
So, once Noah wakes up from his wine and realizes what his youngest son has done, the consequences are severe. Noah issues a harsh and sweeping curse. But I want you to notice carefully exactly who is cursed in verse 25. Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers. The curse is directed specifically at Ham's son Canaan, forever altering the trajectory of their family line. Now, the simple text doesn't explicitly spell out a long theological reason why Canaan is named instead of Ham himself, but it establishes a very clear historical reality for the original readers of Genesis. The descendants of Canaan, the Canaanites, would eventually be subjugated by the descendants of Shem, the Israelites. Noah then moves on to outline the future hierarchy of his descendants. In verses 26 and 27, he issues powerful blessings of prosperity and divine favor directly to Shem and Japheth. He praises the God of Shem, placing Shem in a position of primary spiritual blessing. For Japheth, he prays that God will extend his territory and that he will find a place within the tents of Shem, which indicates a peaceful sharing of Shem's prosperity. And again, he repeats that Canaan will be their servant. Think about that. The actions that took place inside that tent on that one day have forever shaped the destiny of these three massive branches of humanity. Wrapping up this chronological narrative, verses 28 and 29 bring this monumental chapter to a quiet close. It gives us a simple, straightforward timeline. Noah lived another 350 years after the floodwaters dried up. The chapter concludes by noting his incredibly long life, coming to an end at exactly 950 years old, and then he died. The era of the great flood survivor comes to an end, passing the baton entirely to his sons to carry the human race forward. Section 5, Practical Life Lessons. These ancient texts aren't just dry historical records. They are profound mirrors reflecting human nature. Looking back at everything we just covered in this chapter, we find three core simple lessons. First, we must revere the sanctity of life. Every person you meet is made in the image of God,
and we are commanded to treat them with the utmost respect. Second, we see the absolute danger of losing self-control. Noah literally survived the end of the world, but his lack of discipline in his own backyard vineyard brought deep shame upon his household. And finally, the text heavily emphasizes the importance of protecting the dignity of those around us. Shem and Japheth teach us to actively cover up the shame and vulnerability of others, rather than exposing it.
I'll leave you with this provocative thought to reflect on as you consider how the actions of Shem, Ham, and Japheth echo in our own choices today. When someone in your life makes a mistake or is caught in a moment of shame or vulnerability, what is your first instinct? Do you act like Ham and broadcast it to the world? Or do you act like Shem and Japheth, intentionally walking backward to protect their dignity? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.